Good evening, and welcome to another edition of the New Black Leadership Coalition. We are very thankful and honored that you have joined us again on this beautiful, nice, rainy Tuesday day. And I hope you guys enjoyed the weekend. I did with the family and friends. It's always, honestly, an honor. And beyond that, it's a mission and it's an opportunity to say things that you probably won't ever hear on mainstream, the news, on any other channels, and even really on most of the radios that appear to be black, but unfortunately the information is the same old garbage that you get all the time. But anyway, I'm here with the founder of the New Black Leadership and the co-host today, Minister Michael Muhammad. And as always, believe me, a deep, deep, deep pleasure to have Minister Michael on here. And I know he comes with a wealth of information that we don't claim to be ours. I mean, we all are born innately with some things, but we've been taught by a master teacher and great mentors and great people in our life that has given us this spirit and motivation and inspiration to want to make a difference. And again, I'm glad that you hear the sounds coming out of my mouth that says the new black leadership. And indeed, we need new black leadership. And if we had the leadership that we really should have. And let me just say this. When I say leadership, we do have people out here, and we're going to discuss today, and I want to say this before I mentioned over Facebook that we're going to talk about the Chicago's racial employment gap amongst the worst in the nation. But I want to just go back quickly to this whole piece on leadership. Because the New Black Leadership Coalition is a coalition of young, old, in between, fresh leaders, fresh ideas, individuals that really are interested in the advancement of our community. And it's an array, a plethora of issues and problems and all sorts of challenges for our community. So today, I want to just throw this out there, Minister Mike, and you don't even have to be rehearsed when you hear that data, those statistics about Chicago racial employment gap is among the nation's #1 in that category. And does that, I'm going to ask you a question coming out the gates. And folks, you can call in if you want to lend to this conversation, 312-738-1060. And I'm going to put on the board in a minute how you can reach us at the New Black Leadership, the information, the website, and phone number. But out the gates, the disconnected youth, the incarceration rate, I mean, all of the challenges and negativities that we just keep hearing. I don't even want to talk about right now 68 or 69 people, because there's enough blame to go around, but the structural racism, and look, anybody that's thin-skinned and don't want to deal with this, like some people talked about roots. But anyway, going back to the question, the disconnected youth, what's the coalition or what's the parallel that you see in terms of that data? Chicago being the nation's now worst.
Yes. Well, I think that's a good question. And so before I go to the answer to that question, I just want to add to your opening remarks about new black leadership. When we say new black leadership, we're not talking about a particular generational category, whether you're a millennial, Generation Xer, and all of those kind of social categories that have been contrived recently. and are popular in use. When we say new black leadership, we are speaking to the fact that there is a mindset that is destroying the United States of America. There's a way of solving problems. There's a way of constructing and engineering society. There's a way of seeing ourselves, black, white, brown, red, yellow. There's a way of seeing people that leads to a social engineering process that is all predicated upon the superiority of one people over the other and the exploitation of the masses by a handful of people. And so Bernie Sanders is speaking to it from an economic proposition, but we've had some great leaders that have spoke to it across the board, economically, socially, politically, spiritually, etc. And so new black leadership speaks to individuals coming out of a mind, a way of thinking, a way of solving problems that has never been seen or given a chance at the reins of power to determine the outcome of the human condition. So we're talking when we say newness, we want you to understand what we mean. And I see we have some callers, so I'm going to answer your question very quickly, Brother Gregory. The job and unemployment status of black youth is a part of a dynamic, if you will, a paradigm that speaks to the treatment of black people and our young people. So our unemployment is engineered in the same way our miseducation is engineered. There's a way of engineering education that disconnects black males in particular from a interest, from an enthusiasm, from a feeling of belonging in education, and then it steers us to a social condition that traps us in violence and the trappings of violence and poverty, which leads to our exploitation by the criminal justice system, and the cycle just goes around and around and around. So the over 60 or 70% unemployment rate of young black males is a social engineering phenomenon that's connected to these other phenomena. It's not a one-on-one correlation. There are multiple facets to this social engineering process, and unemployment is one of them.
Let's take this caller. Hello, caller. What's your name and where you calling from?
Yes, my name is Steve. I'm calling from the Gold Coast, and I wanted to say that I've spent almost 25 years of my life studying social science issues, specifically those related to race. And I do think that there are a multidimensional set of issues at work here. It is certainly the case that not everyone in our society has equal opportunity with regard to access to capital, education, opportunity. And that, of course, is a function of a great many things. Certainly, there is a racial dimension to it. There's a class dimension, a gender dimension to it, a religious dimension to it. All of these things divide us in terms of where we came from and where we stand in this society. Having said that, it is also the case that beyond demanding that there be some sort of social justice, we should also demand of ourselves and within our own communities and our own families higher standards of behavior in terms of what we expect. Because the young man out there who wants a job and at the same time doesn't know that you don't walk into a job interview with your underwear hanging out, is not prepared for a job, is not prepared to walk in and get a job, even if he's offered the opportunity to do so. And until we start to convey the ideas of these are the things that you cannot do in society, and while expecting to be hired, while expecting to advance, while expecting to make it, as it were, that we've got to get these young people to understand that there's right ways and wrong ways to do things. There are things that you can do on a Saturday night when you're hanging out with your friends that you can't do on a Monday morning when you're on your way to work, in terms of the way that you dress, like with the way that you speak and the way that you conduct yourself. And so again, we need to address this from a multidimensional perspective, hold those who have power to hold their feet to the fire, demand that more resources be allocated to communities that have been left out of the equation, demand more access, talk about issues of injustice, and at the same time ask ourselves, what are we doing or failing to do within communities in terms of raising children and imbuing those children with the proper value systems? Because no matter how much you can change the system, no one can raise your child but yourself.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to say this to Steve. Steve is a noted troller of black shows and radio and otherwise. And Steve, the advice or response I would give is you should be calling white stations and addressing your white brethren who have wealth, power, and influence, and who are some of the social engineers of these conditions that afflict society. And you should be challenging other white men who have ingrained in their very existence a sense of superiority, entitlement, and feeling as though everybody else is dumber than them, less intelligent than they are, less capable than they are. You should stop trying to give directions to black people. You represent the worst kind of people in society who feel as though because they speak in liberal terms, they are entitled to give us direction and give us moral instruction and moral correction. You are indicative of the problem that Adam Clayton Powell Jr. spoke of, and that is the white liberal who fools silly-minded black people into believing that you are our friend because you speak in flattering and soft tones that we can identify with, that you're actually our friend, when all along you are a modern slave master by the way that you think. We know how to handle our children. We know how to resolve our problems. That's why we are on this show trying to speak to our people. I would suggest that you come down to CAN TV as a tax-paying citizen and you erect a show that will communicate to your people and how, the role that they can play in solving the social ills and how those social ills affect black people in America.
Yeah, because we all know that we have to raise our children, Steve, in a manner that we do have values. We came here with values. But when we came in with the values from overseas, what happened? We didn't get a chance to display those values. We were punished. We were placed against each other. But there's a sociological, psychological perspective that you added out of the position that young black males are in. But let's take this other caller, and I want to come back to that. Good evening, caller. How you doing?
Hey, hello?
Yes, good evening, caller. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing okay.
Yes, well, you got a comment or question?
Yeah, I just have a comment.
Okay.
And I wanted to let you know that I agree on what you're saying about the social ills in the black community and the unemployment, but that leads to the heavy penal system that's in this state. This state has the most penal institutions in this state, and that corresponds to the unemployment issues that we have. See, it was an institution called TAMS, I believe. It was, they were trying to close it down. The people and advocates were trying to have it closed, but the government never closed that institution. So up until we close some of these penal institutions down, and so we can tackle some of these ills, and that could help. That will help. That will help curb the unemployment, because this was really part of a conspiracy. Once you build penal institutions and start closing schools, the only other thing that black people could do is be unemployed.
Yes, sir.
So up until we tackle these school closings and them building these penal institutions and not closing them down, we will still have this large unemployment rate.
All right.
And
thank
it's
you.
going to take a team effort for us as black people to try to advocate to have this done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good comments. Let's take the other caller. Hey, caller, how you doing?
Yes. You know what? We got to sit there and really be smart about what is really, truly going on. Now, like you say, we're not getting fully educated. Children are not getting fully educated. Number one, there are schools that don't even have half the capacity of the school. Children are not going, kids are not going to school. Some go to school not to learn, but just to be there. You know what, listen, let me tell you something. And we're not, let's go all the way back.
And let me just say this, I want you to finish.
Parenting, we don't have the parenting like we had.
Right, I want you to finish.
We don't
I
have
want you to finish, but I want you to know that we got a lot of callers on the line, and we don't have a lot of time, so go ahead, make your point. I'm listening. Did he leave?
I'll maybe go to the next one.
Okay, we got another caller. Caller?
Yes, dear.
Yes, ma'am. How you doing?
I'm very good. I'm very good. I'm just enjoying seeing two articulate brothers on the show.
Thank you.
I just want to what are we doing to get our African Americans out to vote?
Okay, thank you.
That's a great question. And as the New Black Leadership Coalition, we have a division that we're building entitled the Institute for Black Political Empowerment. And in July, we will be starting our inaugural civic and political lecture and education series, where we're going to be offering world-class education and training to the black community specifically. Anybody who wants to understand how to be a smart voter and use their vote, as well as anybody who wants to know how to make their organization politically influential, and anybody who expects to become an elected official. We intend over time that they must come through this political education to ensure that they have some values that make them advocates for black people.
Excellent. Call them. How you doing?
Yes, this is Steve calling back with regard to this issue. And I mean, I would take issue with the notion that somehow that one has to be of a particular group, that if I am Caucasian, that I need to be talking to people like me. Well, I don't regard people like me as simply because of the notion that they are Caucasian and I'm Caucasian. People like me can be any number of people. They don't have to be Caucasian, and I take issue with regard to the problems that I see amongst Caucasians. I take issue amongst those who are African Americans, Hispanics. I think they're right-minded people within all groups, and the idea that you should simply focus within your own group is absurd, because the problems that are going to be resolved in our society are going to be resolved when we come together to exchange ideas, to agree, to disagree at times. But we can do it civilly, and we certainly shouldn't marginalize people for wanting to make those contributions. I mean, this notion that somehow, everyone knows how to do the right thing. No, jails in our communities are full of people who don't know how to do the right thing.
Right, we got it. We got your point.
Listen, Steve. No disrespect to you, but it's highly insulting to our intelligence. We're talking about social ills that affect black people disproportionately, unarguably, by any measurement. So therefore, we have issues that are internal and external that we have a right to speak about amongst ourselves, and you do not qualify because you are not one of us. You do not have our life experiences. You do not suffer from our social ills. You're not burdened by the baggage of a white supremacist society to this moment that is imposing its white supremacist ideology and value standards on us as a community of people. Therefore, you are misplaced. I listen to white and black communications, radio and television. I never hear you call in WLS. I never hear you call in any of the white stations, Moody Radio, WGN. You never call white shows and give your comment. Maybe I've heard you once or twice in the last 15 years call a white show. You always, every day, spend your time trying to dictate to black people how they should think and how they should strategize to solve their problems. But you're not qualified, Steve.
Let's take this other caller. I think Steve get it, and maybe this would change Steve's ways of understanding that.
Well, maybe if Steve's not qualified, maybe this blind country boy can speak. when I look around Chicago and I see certain different type of disparities, I give you an example, okay? Name one black restaurant downtown in the Loop. Name one, here we got one of the biggest attractions in the state, Navy Pier. We don't have not even one black restaurant, not one black vendor.
That's
we
right.
have such separate and unequal when it comes to different types of opportunities in the city of Chicago. And yet we got opportunity going on for everybody else, but there's none for in terms of black and Hispanic. When you have these big construction projects in the city of Chicago, yes, there's always Walls Construction Company. Why we can't have some major black contractors doing some of these big contracts in the city?
You know what? Thank you. And I wish you would have called earlier because you got a lot of good stuff to say. We got
That's
a
right.
couple of minutes left. So, Minister Mike, in the last couple of minutes, thank you. And listen, folks, that fire is healthy that you heard. You're going to hear more. And don't forget, every Monday night at 10 p.m. on intellectualradio.com, we have a whole hour to talk about all of these things and some more. This is just part one of this subject because it is what new black leadership is all about. Thank you
Thank
and
you.
have a great evening.